Hello everyone, and welcome to the Capricorn Full Moon reading, which is coming up on the 3rd of July. I've got the chart open here, and I just want to jump right into discussing the energy of this full moon. Just a reminder that if you have your own chart and you look at where these planets will be falling in your chart, that's going to help you to get a lot more personalized into deciding how impactful or recognizing how impactful this full moon potentially is for you. Because as I say so often, I have this love-hate relationship with full moons. I love gazing at the full moon. She's absolutely glorious. I love smudging my house and cleansing my crystals and all of that during this time. However, I'm very aware, having worked with lunar cycles and phases for, wow, maybe I'm in about my 8th year of following these phases. And I'm very aware that full moons bring out whatever is in the unconscious space for us, because the moon, in fact, is the unconscious. And so when she's at her fullest, when she's reflecting the full light of the sun, she can really bring forth things that maybe otherwise would be kept trapped, kept beneath the surface, under our consciousness, below that. And then also stuff that's in the shadows, stuff that we maybe haven't wanted to look at. And think about, again, that being a nighttime. She comes out, she's the night light. So when the light in the night is full, we can see things we may not have always been able to see, or we've maybe been able to hide from ourselves, from others, whatever that is. This is a time where it's more likely to come out. That will also correlate with which full moon it is. In this case, it's Capricorn, and also more personally, how that impacts your personal birth chart, natal chart, whichever way you want to say that. So let me see. Jumping right in here, we can see that the full moon is happening. Here's the moon at 11 degrees of Capricorn, and here's the sun opposite that at 11 degrees of Cancer. So anytime we're dealing with the dynamic of Cancer, Capricorn, we're talking about our home work-life balance. We're talking about good mother and father energies, or bad mother and father energies. And that's not talking, I mean, it can be talking to one's actual mother or father, or the history of your mothering and your fathering, but it's also very much about the internal mothering archetype within you and the fathering archetype within you. Because you can't change how your childhood was, but you can change the narrative around how you parent yourself, because we do parent ourselves. So if, when you're being super critical, you hear yourself using words that are literally how your father used to speak to you when you didn't do well in a test, or your mother used to speak to you when you messed on your clothes, or whatever the case may be, if you hear a similar narrative, similar phrases, that words, that sort of thing, then you need to catch yourself and go, hang on a second, maybe I don't need to speak to myself like that. And then you need to reparent yourself. You need to reparent and repattern how you handle that. And it's not about your gender when you're doing this for yourself, because you have an internal feminine and masculine. Excuse me. So definitely you want to look at if you have any planets or points around about the 11 degree mark of Cancer and Capricorn. And then you would look to the squares, the other two cardinal signs, which would be Libra and Aries as well. And you can broaden that out about 3 to 5 degrees on either side, or work intuitively. How do you feel? Maybe you would say that that is just outside of the region. Let's say, for example, I have my Mercury at 16 degrees of Cancer. So it would be right next to this Mercury, really. But I might be able to say to myself, oh, it's a little far out for the sun to be very impactful. However, I'm going to feel into that for myself and go, no, I can actually feel that this is going to be quite pertinent to me. This is coming really close to an important planet in my chart. I'm very mercurial. And then, okay, in that particular case, in my case, I would also say, and I'm about to have a Mercury return, because within the space of a day or so, Mercury will actually be on my Mercury. So from this point. So I will then say to myself, okay, let's just check how the internal narrative is, or even the external narrative is coming at me, so that I can reflect it like the sun is reflecting his light onto the moon. And I can see where maybe I've been telling the story in a way that is old and outdated or some such. Okay, there's many different ways. So this is about the nuance of learning about yourself. And that's actually, for me, that's where astrology is the most powerful. If you start to learn to understand your natal chart and yourself more fully, then it's about you feeling into that for you, because nobody knows you as well as you do, or certainly nobody should know you as well as you do. And so many of us leave a lot in our unconscious because we are too scared to bring it up, which is fully understandable. But if we don't bring it out of the unconscious and into the light, we can't change and transform it, okay? So Mercury is very present in this particular full moon, and he's actually still in charge of the whole lunation cycle because he was in charge of the last new moon. So he's right next to the sun, which means he's not visible in the evening sky, but he's very much drawing from the light of the sun and drawing from the intensity of that. Keywords we would put to the sign of Cancer would be mother, nurturer, smothering. We'd want to watch for that. Moody, crabby. It's the sign of the moon, but the moon is actually in the furthest place from her home, so she doesn't really feel super comfortable in Cancer. It's Saturn, in Capricorn, because it's Saturn's domain, and Saturn kind of is cold and dark, and she's trying to light up now. And Saturn is also very ordered and very structured, and he says, you know, don't wax and wane all the time, be consistent, be resilient. And the moon's whole vibe is waxing and waning all the time. She's never the same. So you can see how Capricorn moon is not always a comfortable place for us to be. Again, depending how much Capricorn you have, or how much Cancer you have, or many other options that there could be, you might find that this is a very productive time for you. Maybe your moods get pushed to the side and you get organized, because Capricorn moon can have that effect. But you might find that after that, you maybe have a little emotional meltdown because you ignored your emotions. So there's many, as I say, I'm giving you kind of ideas of ways this could play out, but you're to watch your own process. And when you've gone through numerous Capricorn full moons over a period of time, you start to go, this is how the Capricorn energy usually impacts me, or this is how the Capricorn full moon usually impacts me. And you will see similarities coming again and again for you to rework. It's like taking the box out of the cupboard, opening the lid, looking through it again. I see now, this is what I need to work on. Oh, my cat just came charging in here like something startled him. And then after the Capricorn full moon, you put the box back and you put it away, and next Capricorn full moon, you take it out again and you have a look. And you could do that with the 2.5 days that the moon is in Capricorn every single month, or you could do that when it's full moon or new moon in Capricorn. The point is we get to come back around and back around and back around and work things through again and again and again, gently over time. That is my favorite lesson of the moon, is that it doesn't have to be done today or yesterday. This goes against my nature, so it's an important lesson that she's been teaching me for years, is it's cumulative. It takes time. And that is also actually a Saturn theme. And this moon is ruled by Saturn. Saturn says it takes time. So this is particularly good for you to just be a little bit patient with yourself and look at what has the narrative been. Go back to mother, father, go back to the home and roots. How long has it taken me to establish this pattern? And therefore, how long is it going to take me to unestablish the parts of the pattern that are no longer working, but also to keep certain traditional things that I like about my upbringing, my way of being. So you get to choose. You don't have to kick everything out of the story. You adjust and adapt for what works for you now. So that's quite and I'm speaking a lot about story because the new moon that we're still kind of being is the overarching leader of this, was very much Mercury and the story. What is the story? And Mercury is very, very present in this full moon again. How do I re-story? What needs to go? What needs to stay? Then another thing that's let me just say before I move on from that, the sun is making a beautiful sextile to Jupiter and a trine to Saturn. So Saturn and Jupiter, who are kind of like expansion and contraction. Again, Mercury, who rules our lungs, is the ruler of this whole lunation. And I want you to think of Saturn and Jupiter like breathing. We have to inhale and expand, Jupiter, and then we have to exhale and contract, Saturn. It's a process. You can't really do just the one. If we kept inhaling, we'd float up like a balloon or we'd pop. And if we kept exhaling, we would just sink and die. So in order to be alive, be present, be in the process, we have to have this expansion and contraction. And that's being kind of supporting the whole sun's story. And because the sun is in the sign of Cancer for this full moon, we're in that space of how do I mother myself, my soul, my light? How do I nurture myself? And one of those ways is breathing. So if you're feeling a little panicked or overwhelmed, I would highly, highly recommend some breath work for this particular cycle. Because of course, Saturn and Jupiter are also sextile one another. So they're sextile to each other. Jupiter's sextile to the sun, and the sun is trine Saturn. So there's a beautiful harmonious relationship going on here that is really supporting us in a gentle and graceful way while we come to terms with where should I be expanding, where should I be contracting, where am I actually doing both simultaneously. As I expand, maybe I stretch a little more in this direction, and as I contract, maybe I pull a bit more so that I'm incrementally moving, or however that shows up in your life. But then what I really also wanted to speak into, because the relational dynamic has been coming up super strongly for a good few months now, or moons, and it's something that we are dealing with in a very big way in the collective. And Venus, who is very much attached to relationships, is going to be doing a retrograde in Leo. I've done a whole separate forecast on that, so you can look that up if you're interested. She is already in Leo here, and she is already within her shadow space. She's got to get a few more degrees before she turns retrograde later in July, but she's already in that space. She's sort of chasing after Mars, but she's not actually going to catch him because she's slowing down, which is not something that she's faster than him. So she would normally have caught him and moved on, but because she's preparing to retrograde, she's going slower than usual. So these two are in a conjunction, but it's a further conjunction where she won't quite catch him exactly. But that already has a relational dynamic, bringing Mars, the sacred masculine, and Venus, the divine feminine, into a similar space. And they're both in the sign of sovereignty and the heart, and keeping your heart open, but also having a level of personal independence and autonomy and authority. So you are the authority in your life, whether you are looking at your inner masculine or feminine, or whether you are a woman within relationship with somebody else, then you say, well, what is my Venus part? How do I stay sovereign? Whether you are a man, it doesn't really matter about the gender, because you will have all of these aspects within you. But that is quite a potent little power pack as it is. But then they're also actually forming a square to Uranus. And remember, Uranus is about revolution, evolution, freedom, sometimes freedom fighting, sometimes shocks in order to shift. And he's creating a pressure point with closer to Venus, because he's at 21 degrees, she's at 22, but also to Mars. So there is a gain, and this, as I say, is not a new story. It's something we've been working on for a long time. And here is another big push point for that evolution and transformation within relationships. So really a good idea to take a minute and say, what did I believe a good relationship was? And this can be your romantic partnerships, this can be your business partnerships, this can be you as a parent, this can be you as a child. I mean, friendships, relationships are a broad topic. So look at the ones that are being super activated for you right now, and then sit with it. Maybe journal if you're a journaler, and ask yourself, what did I think the best friendship was, or the best romantic partnership was? And write that down. What is my ideal? What is the value that I hold around that? And then ask yourself, where did that come from? Because now, with Leo being about me and my own personal autonomy, you might say, well, I don't actually know why I thought that was what I wanted. I don't know where that comes from. And then you might find it comes from, let's go back to our home and roots and our upbringing, our parents, and maybe that came through from their parents and their parents before them. Maybe we've been carrying this pattern through of what we thought a relationship should look like. However, it wasn't our own idea. It was way back ancestors' ideas, and times have changed, and maybe your ideals and values have shifted, and that's okay, because when Venus goes retrograde, this conversation that is already being kind of spotlighted is going to expand. It's going to get more uncomfortable, because now we'll have this concept of, oh, I actually don't believe that, but now what? What do I believe? How do I unpack that when it's in my cells, it's inherited patterning? That's quite hard to unravel. So that is a big aspect of this particular full moon as well that I wanted to speak to. And then Black Moon Lilith is also very close to these two. And she, in fact, if we looked at Mars being Adam and Venus being Eve, Lilith was Adam's first wife. So she's the one who rebelled from the norm in the first place. So, sorry, let me just blow that up. So it's very interesting that she's here, because she was then in myth said to be the serpent. She became a shaman and a shapeshifter, and she was the serpent that said to Eve, you don't have to be subservient to Adam and taste this apple and you will be able to see. And so she was very demonized and written out of the Bible. For many years she was kind of dormant, but as she's risen back up again, a lot of the feminine archetypes, the strong feminine archetypes like Eris and Lilith, are coming back into fruition, because the balance through hundreds of thousands of years of patriarchy is shifting back. So we need to find the strong feminine, and Lilith is that. And she's interestingly very engaged with, let's call them Adam and Eve for the moment, very engaged in saying, how do you want to change it? And again, coming back to, not everything needs to change. We don't need to throw everything out. We just need to reevaluate why we think these things, we believe these things, we want these things. If it's still true for us, what parts we're keeping and what parts we're not. And then Lilith being at 19 degrees of Leo is forming a beautiful trine at 19 degrees of Aries to Chiron. And for me, this is really important, because Chiron is the wound. And Lilith is the fierce, shamanic, shape-shifting, like potent feminine energy. So where is that old patriarchal wounding, and how has it impacted the feminine from being her fierce, wise self? Now, the masculine have been just as damaged, but in slightly different ways, by the patriarchy. So this applies no matter what your gender is, because we are really in a space of deep healing. But in order to do the deep healing, I mean, Lilith went through a crazy journey of shamanic transformation in order to become the shaman, in order to become the shapeshifter and the strong wild woman that she was. She went out into the complete unknown, and she dared to do the work. And for those of us who do the work, it's hard. It's not always fun. Sometimes it's easier to just kind of stay in the unconscious. And certainly I know for myself, I often kind of wish I could just do that, but that wasn't my path in this life. And I only wish that for moments. And then I'm back to finding that courage, digging deep and doing the work. This, for those of us who do the work, this is a powerful full moon to work with that. There's so much more I could say about this, but I don't really want to go on for too long. Remember that Pluto, who we've been speaking about so much, and Neptune are in a sextile as well. So they are working again to transform what has been a little bit delusional or illusion, the illusion that wasn't the reality. That's also really coming up for transformation, which super duper ties into all that we've already said about relationship dynamics, about the ways we've been grown through our ancestry. Things worked for a time because of. That doesn't necessarily mean that we never have to upgrade. I mean, think about technology and how fast it's moving. If you don't upgrade your software, if you don't upgrade your apps on your phone, nothing works properly. And that's kind of what's happening to us as humanity. We're upgrading, but we are struggling. It's not as easy as just pressing a button on your computer and being patient while it does its upgrading process. It's a little more challenging for us, and we have to really put in sometimes the hard graft, which again comes to Saturn, who's ruling this lunation. And I think with Saturn having the final word there, that seems like the perfect place to stop. So I will say, as I stop that share, thank you so much for watching. Remember, I'm available for all sorts of support. You can check the link down below. I really appreciate comments, likes, shares, so that I know that these videos are landing and supporting, and I will keep bringing them to you. And any suggestions also would be welcome of things that you would like to know a little bit more about. Thanks for your time. Have a wonderful full moon, and I will see you again soon.